All right, so here I am, Dr. Heather Rice from Wellspring Chiropractic Lifestyle Center, and tonight I am interviewing somebody I know very well. This is Dr. Patrick MacManaway, who actually is my husband. Okay, did you catch that? Husband, right? I hate that idea of ex, right? But Patrick is the father of my daughter and a lovely person and a very good friend. And I wanted to interview him because of the services, what he has to offer to our community and to the world in regards to health. And it's a whole other segment that many people have never even considered before. So my area of expertise is all around helping people to have the healthiest nervous system possible so they can adapt to their environment. And Patrick's expertise is taking it from the body outward, right? And looking at the health of the environment. So when we think of this idea of sick houses or sad buildings, Patrick actually is the person that can help to fix that. And so I wanted to just interview him so that you all can get an idea of the world that he lives in and what he has to offer. And I want to start by just telling you a quick story of when we first moved to Vermont. I purchased a chiropractic practice in Shelburne that was in a home, and I didn't want to practice in that home. And so at that time, the space that I'm now in, which is the Commons, Shelburne Commons, at that time, it had gone back to the bank 3 times. Like any business that went into that spot actually failed. And that spot used to be a farm, and then it was developed into this beautiful, beautiful space with lots of lovely stores and businesses that were thriving in one place came into this space expecting to continue to thrive, and they all just failed. And so when we came into that place, it had gone back to the bank for the 3rd time. And so we got a really good deal on our rent to start with. But what happened was Patrick was able to detect what was going on and what needed to be done to fix it. And ever since that happened, any business that came into that space, the only reason they left is because they had expanded and needed to get to another level and find a bigger space, a better space. So Patrick, I want you to just tell a little bit more of the details of that story, and so people can kind of get an idea of what you do. So go ahead.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks everybody for your attention to this particular topic. So just one step back, as Heather's referring, there is in fact a recognized syndrome, which is sick building syndrome, which we hear a little bit about from time to time. And at one point, the World Health Organization assessed that 30% of our buildings were sick buildings based on their criteria of 20% or more of the occupants of the space having health or comfort problems related to the space itself. And so, just as Heather was saying, part of environmental health is whether our environment is supportive or undermining or stressful, in fact, to our own health. And there's a range of environmental stressors, and then there's a range of personal constitutional robustness. So as with other stressors, at different times of our year or our life or our day, we may be more or less vulnerable to the stress factors around us. But certainly, based on the WHO statistics, I think it's a very fundamental aspect at the level of diet and nutrition and exercise and chiropractic care and the other things we do to take care of ourselves to try and make as healthy a living and working space to support our individual and family health. And as business, as Heather's referring, not only do we want our our families to thrive, but our businesses to thrive and our farms to thrive, and whatever is the use of the space to at some level be optimized. So there's a list of things that can make a building sick, that include air quality, sound quality, light quality, electromagnetic fields. The areas that I particularly specialize in are working with geopathic stress, and the energetic aspects of ghosts or curses, or what the Chinese would call predecessor.
Hang on for a minute, Patrick. Might have had a little glitch here. Hang on.
Sharing, in that case, a very classical geopathic stress, which is sourced by underground water running in faults and fractures below surface. I think about 163 feet by memory below the commons. And
okay, so sorry, Patrick, just for a second, my internet just dropped for a moment. And so just to catch up here, so looking at the commons space, start again with,
yes.
What did you detect? Yeah.
So really the most classic traditionally understood stress is called a geopathic stress, which is something that's natural to the place, but unhealthy for people. And the classic with that is pathways of water running underground in fractures in the rock, typically and interestingly between surface and about 300 feet. And that really creates effectively a naturally occurring electrostress. The water is conductive. Its movement through paramagnetic rock creates a weak magnetic field that disturbs the Earth's natural magnetic field at that point. So it's sort of an electrostress that mediates through pineal and adrenal glands initially in our own physiological makeup. And so it'll tend to disturb, it'll tend to give a low-grade anxiety and sleep disturbance, mood affectations variously, and sleep, and then all sort of biological regulatory cycles dependent on the pineal can get compromised in that way. So that's our most classic form of geopathic stress, and actually the work that originally got me into the field, learning about research from Austria in the 1920s.
So essentially, Patrick, the way I've heard you describe it before is the Chinese look at the lines of qi that run in the body.
Right.
So if anybody's ever had acupuncture or something like that, where the acupuncturist is looking at the lines of qi and whether there's a disturbance, and then they'll use an acupuncture needle to try and bring harmony to that. The Chinese don't distinguish a difference between the lines of qi that run in the body and the lines of qi that run in the earth. And so if there's a disharmonious line of qi running in the earth, that can also bring some toxic energy or some disturbance to the building or the land where that's flowing. That is, it may not be healthy for human habitation. And if your house is sitting on one of those lines that's disturbed, then you're going to be in a toxic field that could affect your business or your relationships or your own health. Is that about right?
Beautifully summarized. Yes, exactly as Heather's observing. There's really no distinction between landscape qi and human qi. It's just a fractal of scale. And so what for us are meridians that our acupuncturists or shiatsu practitioners would work on in the landscape traditionally would be called dragons, lung mei, spirit paths. They go by many names around the world, the song lines and ley lines and so on. And there are yang qi pathways that are solar generated by the solar wind, and then yin qi pathways mostly related to underground water, as I was referencing earlier. And so bringing up, so there's two agendas with the place. One is, as Heather's saying, to take care of any disharmonious energies that have got in there. Sites have a long history. They may have seen battlefields or suicides or murders or bankruptcies or generations of happy grannies baking cakes for happy grandchildren. It's very widespread, but so one thing is to first take out any distress or disharmony, and then the second thing is to balance the space, a bit like tuning a musical instrument, so that it's as much as possible perfectly harmonious to its current residence and use.
Okay, so now take us back to the commons, and what did you discover there, and how did you address it?
So very classic underground water, which in elemental terms is a yin chi, is draining, is depleting. We like to put our feet on bare earth to ground the static out of our system, but if you do that over underground water, it'll drain your battery flat, basically. And so that was what was going on at the Commons. It was just draining everybody's battery flat. And so the simple remedy for that, in fact, is a form of earth acupuncture, classically using mild steel, sometimes copper. Also historically using stones, as per Stonehenge, is an energetic adaptation and manipulation of landscape energies.
Standing stones,
so we didn't put standing stones at the Commons. It would have been fun to do that. We didn't have a budget. So we used simple copper rods, much like you would use as rebar. And as Heather described, that seems to take care of the problem very nicely indeed.
Yeah. So, and just so you know, I have Patrick continuously caretaking the space. So like when they're doing construction next door to us and they're pounding on the ground, that can disrupt the energy of those lines. And so Patrick then tweaks that, smooths it out so that we have this very healthy, energetically robust space where I am all day long working, and I have my team there all day. And then all of my patients that come in, they're coming into a really healthy space. So not just the work that we're doing together with your spine and nervous system, but literally the space you're in is a healthier space. So Patrick, can you tell me more about, for example, many people are gardening this time of the year. Like I keep hearing people talking about their back hurts because they've been doing a lot more gardening, not to mention being more sedentary because of the isolation rules right now. But the idea of gardening and how the work that you do could actually help clear a garden. And I love the story about the Brussels sprouts growing and the energy line that was going through there. And can you tell that story?
Well, various stories, honestly, about plant growth. The kind of geopathic stress that we were referencing in domestic space, some plant species don't like it. Fruiting trees don't like it. Vegetables that come to a head above ground don't particularly like that. Sometimes one can see very dramatic diminution in the size of plants across a line of them if they're being crossed by an underground stream. I think so. There's certainly there's considerations as to where to plant. There's considerations as to tuning the growing space optimal for the plants that are being invited and hosted during that growing season. And then there are lovely stories of the response to plant whispering, of increased yields, and yields all coming at one time to harvest convenience. So both through assessment and looking at a site, but also then through coaching or the kind of tele-classes that I'm teaching. There's nothing more lovely than to talk to your plants and the soil biology and the surrounding devic community generally, because as with the other layers of intelligence in place, they're amenable, they're interactive, they're participant, and if we get ourselves onto their level and communicate with them clearly, then they're wonderfully cooperative, and the results can be wonderful.
I love this idea of how much we can actually co-create with our environment. So it's one thing to just throw the seeds in the ground, cover them with dirt, give them water, give them fertilizer, and let the sun do its work. But there's so much more that can be added to that, and how we can really support the energy of what that vitality is that's growing. And so there's the one part of, like, the story I'm remembering is there was a garden that had these rows of Brussels sprouts growing. And there was clearly, if you looked across the garden, there was a place where all the Brussels sprouts were tall. And then this one area where they were short and shriveled and then tall again. And you look in the next row and the same thing's happening, the same things. Okay, sorry about that. Whoops, where's Patrick? There we go. My internet dropped out. So I think it's still recording now. So we're going to just pick up where we left off. So, and so the Brussels sprouts are all growing up beautifully, except for the places where they're all shriveled right in a line. And
right.
Then, what's that?
They lost 40% of their crop to a grumpy dragon.
Yeah. Okay. And so then
it was a small plot, but they were dynamic and they were very careful, and they planted along the line of a water vein for two of their rows, and literally lost 40% of the crop to it, which would be significant.
Yeah,
obviously at subsistence scale.
And so then you did your land whispering magic, you did your earth acupuncture, you helped to harmonize that disruptive energy line, and then the next season.
Not in that garden. On that occasion, the scale was small enough that it made more sense to use the presence of the water line to advantage, because there are some plants that are very supported by that yin, just in the way that there are some acid or alkaline loving, or like it hot, like it wet, like it dry, like it cold. So on larger scales, though, where selective planting isn't amenable, once you're onto sort of agricultural scale, then typically it makes more sense to tune the field as best as possible to supporting the whole crop. And I've certainly seen 25 and 30, and on one occasion a 44% increase in yield.
In crop yield.
Following careful work of both space clearing and then energetic optimizing through the earth acupuncture techniques, and then on top of that, really deep, clear communication with the devic intelligences of the plant and the elemental intelligences of the field and soil, and chatting with the dragons and trying to get the whole thing just optimally supportive of the crop in place.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So, the thing that I love is that you can take, for example, a garden that is, not providing good crops, and you can shift what the crops are so they're thriving in a certain environment. And then you can also just look at overall just improving crop yield. So that's such a demonstration of how a shift in the energy can produce so much more. And then you can also look at a business environment like our business, where our business is, and how that can actually, you can optimize that environment. I'd love for you to tell a story about someone that is in a home environment, maybe where there's been a ghost or some disturbance, and how you've been able to make a change there and make it healthier in that way. And how did that show up?
Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot with a story like that?
Well, I just I think in general terms, children and animals classically are the most sensitive to the energetics in space, and so with the ghost in the house, often it'll disturb a child's sleep. They'll report seeing things at night, or being frightened to go to bed, or uncomfortable being alone in some part of the space. That can obviously be tremendously disruptive to the family dynamic, as well as the sort of emotional, psychological health of the child concerned. So that's very classic, is sort of psychic disturbance, ghosts bumping about in the night. I actually would share one rather whimsical. There was a family in the west of Scotland who had a ghost and knew they had a ghost. But the problem with the ghost was that it would walk down the corridor of their bedroom, and there was a loose board that would make a banging noise. And so their solution first was to fix the board. But still, in fact, the ghost was making a noise in the corridor, and so the next solution was to put a carpet on the corridor. But still, the problem persisted and nobody was getting any sleep, and so they finally called me to get the ghost the help it needed to go back to friends and family waiting for it in the heaven realm. And then all was quiet at night, and the children slept well, and the dogs didn't bark at something that the people couldn't see. So sometimes it's quite whimsical. If you can't fix it with a nail in the board or a carpet, then it's time for the Ghostbuster.
Right.
So sometimes it's sleep disturbance, and people are aware of something a little ill at ease, that they particularly pick up in a sort of sleep and dreaming space. Sometimes with an elemental disturbance, people just never quite feel at ease in their space. There's something not quite right. Often that is subsequent to just construction, and as you were saying, pounding the ground, or foundations being dug, and it sort of makes a little bit of a shock state in the pattern layer of existing elemental awareness, and then the place just feels a little bit on edge. And if people are sensitive to that, then it becomes a bit hard to settle. I've seen houses where people have called me in and they've changed the bed 5 times, carpet 3 times, and repainted the wall 20 times, and they just can't quite get it to feel like home. And it's generally then because obviously there's something underlying and off radar that's actually part of the energy of the space. And if we can get resolved, then everything sort of feels like home, and then people can invest positive emotional energy into building up an increasingly inspiringly healthy and happy atmosphere for themselves and their family around them.
So I love this idea, because I know that there are some people that, like, there's a certain house on a street, and every family that moves into that house, everyone gets divorced and leaves, and they leave the house, the next family comes in, they get divorced. Or there's another house on the street where anybody that lives there gets cancer when they live in that house, or there's sickness in that house. And so just like clearing those lines, making it a healthier environment, you literally can see relationships improve, you can see health improve. So I love that idea of those kind of dramatic, powerful, really health deterrents that can happen. But I also like the idea of wellness. So I've seen you work in spaces where someone will just have you come in and you will be able to identify based on the natural energy that's in the landscape that the house is sitting on, that there are certain rooms that are going to be better for thinking and concentrating and, you know, paying your bills and managing your finances. And then there's going to be another room that's more for that dreamy state where it's going to be great for meditating or something like that. So I love this idea of how can you take the space that you're in and understand how to use it in the best way possible? And then how can you keep it maintained in that wellness state? So can you say more about how you help people with those things?
Yes. Thank you. So part of it is just identifying what's already naturally present. High spots, low spots, peak spots, energized spots, places that are good for sleeping quietly versus places that are good for sort of focused or energized work or performance or group gathering. You want a very different vibe in the town hall on meeting day or in the discotheque than you want in the library, and so on. And so to some extent we analyze with what's already there and bring that apparent. And then also because there is quite a lot of adaptation and tuning that we can do, it's possible as much as can to bring a space into as support a harmonic for the particular activity that is, whether it's retail or sleep space or kitchen space or dance space, or you know, just to try and get the atmosphere right. And we do that, we know, in many ways, using color and staging and lighting and music and so on. So it's really just an extension of what we automatically do. But those sort of fundamental energetics of the atmosphere are very...
Hang on. Okay, let's try this again. Internet. All right. Oh dear, the internet is just not
Back again.
Yeah. So I love that idea that you're describing of how you work with the energy of a space, with lighting, with colors, with music, but also with specifically understanding what nature is already providing, and then how you can actually harmonize and clear things that are disruptive. Yeah. So can you say more about, like, I know that you go on site to do things, but you also work in other ways, and especially right now while the whole social distancing and isolating is happening. Tell us how you could still be helping somebody if they needed help right now, what you could do.
Absolutely. So as with many modalities of healing, some techniques are amenable to use at a distance, purely through connecting and resonating with the sort of vibrational barcode, either of a person or a place or a business or a project. And so we can understand this in some regards more easily than others. But for example, working with a ghost, the ghost already doesn't have a physical presence. It's there as an energy field. And so what we're connecting with, even in the presence of the ghost, is not the physical presence of the ghost. It's the vibrational intelligence of that being. And just in the same way that we can move our mind around, remembering where we were at a birthday or Christmas or a special time, or looking at a picture or a photograph, if we have a unique identifier, I like to work with photographs and maps, and also to have a conversation with people, phone, telephone, Zoom, or email exchange. So as long as I can get the story and visual on the space, and Google Earth is just fantastic for this because you can zoom in and out and see what's around the space and tune in very nicely. So a huge amount of the work, because it is working on a vibrational level, can be done from a distance using maps and photographs. And then what I like to do if I work that way is keep in touch with a client for at least a month, so that I can work and get feedback, and then if need be, fresh photographs, and work more and get feedback until we're happy that the job is done. Some of the work is best done on site. At the Commons, it really wanted some steel rods put in the ground to disperse the geomagnetism that was sourced from the underground water. So it's not possible for me to do all of my work, but it's generally possible for me at least to do 80% of the work on most species and 100% of the work on some species. And certainly at the moment, given our constraints of movement, I can go as far as I can, working long distance, and then if there's on-site work needed, then of course we can pick that up when we're moving around again. But I would say maybe as much as 50% of my work I never go on site, and I'm working around the world for clients who discuss their concerns with me, send me maps and photographs, and the work is done entirely long distance. So long distance to Maui, long distance to Australia. I'm also happy to do long distance to College Street and Shelburne. So some jobs I prefer to go on site for. All jobs I can help long distance. Many jobs I can do entirely long distance if that's the expedient. Yeah.
Great. Well, I know that you also love to teach, and you love to share your knowledge with people and empower them so that they can even do things in their own space and just learn more of how they can caretake the environments that they're in. So can you tell us more about some of the upcoming teleclasses that you have?
Yes. Well, similar to Dr. Heather Rice, I love to share good news and useful knowledge. And I teach classes and mentor people ongoing around the world around the year. But currently we have a series of 4 teleclasses themed on 4 different topics relating to the work. The first is a general look at how vibrational intelligence communicates, expresses, is available to the physical realm, and how our minds and imagination give us interaction with that. Very classically, how our thoughts become intentions, become reality, and more beyond that, and a little bit of the physics of consciousness. Then our second talk is on the dragons and elemental and nature spirit world, as we were mentioning, both in terms of the elemental structure of our homes, but also the growing intelligences in farm and garden. And then thirdly, we're looking at angels and spirit guides, just getting a sense of what's available to us for support and guidance in all of the most mundane ways as we go through our life, from cooking to making decisions about our health and welfare. And then a final class in this series, we'll just look at further tools and techniques, from telepathy to dowsing and muscle testing to shamanic journeys, in terms of getting more facility and comfort and confidence with communicating with whatever intelligences are consistently helpful for us. Typically we find a pretty small team, a bit like a property manager having a go-to plumber and electrician and sewer guys, whatever. We establish relationship with the garden gnome and the family angel and the house diva, and then we're good to go. But it can take a little bit of time just to sort of get comfortable and confident with that. So that last class will just be sort of reviewing and exploring different techniques for people to do those things. And surely there'll be more after that, but that's as far as we've got in the series so far.
That's fantastic. So what I'm hoping is that somewhere around this video, below it maybe, you're going to see where there are some links and some descriptions so that you, if folks are interested in that you can get yourself signed up for that and really get some great content that you can start applying immediately that can really enhance your health and your relationships and your home and your garden and just help you to have the best life possible. So thank you so much, Dr. Patrick MacManaway. And we look forward to hearing more from you again in the future. And I hope we can do more of this again, do a little bit more detail on some other topics. Sound
Thanks
good?
so much, pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.